A soft clink like a spoon tapping the edge of a mug. My body stiffened. I wasn't dreaming, I was sure of it. The clock on the nightstand glowed 2:14 a.m. My first instinct was to nudge my husband, but as I turned I saw him there, fast asleep. My stomach tightened. If he was here, then who was in the kitchen? I held my breath, straining to listen. Another faint shuffle. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe I had left the window open, maybe it was just the house settling. But then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of someone moving. My pulse pounded in my ears. Morning arrived too fast, and I could still feel the unease lingering in my chest as I poured coffee. My husband sat down and casually announced, "My brother's moving in for a while." The words hit me harder than they should have. I forced a smile, but something felt off. When he arrived later that day, his energy filled the house immediately. Charming, relaxed, easygoing. But his eyes lingered on me too long. I shrugged it off until I noticed my coffee cup wasn't where I had left it. Inside, cold coffee stains swirled at the bottom. But I hadn't had any yet. At first it was easy to ignore. He was friendly, helpful, always ready with a joke. But then I started noticing things. Too many things. He knew how I liked my tea, just a splash of milk, no sugar. He hummed along to my morning playlist before I even pressed play. One afternoon he casually mentioned a funny story I had only ever told my husband, something personal, something I knew for a fact my husband never shared. My breath hitched for just a second, but I forced a laugh. "Did he tell you that?" I asked. His eyes flickered with amusement before he shrugged. "Must have overheard it. But I knew that wasn't possible. When I told my husband, he chuckled. That's just how he is, he pays attention." His words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't. Later, our elderly neighbor waved me over. "Saw your brother-in-law outside last week," she said. I frowned. "He had only moved in 2 days ago." "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Watched him walk past your window. Thought he lived here already." A chill ran down my spine. At first it was easy to ignore. He was friendly, helpful, always ready with a joke. But then I started noticing things. Too many things. He knew how I liked my tea, just a splash of milk, no sugar. He hummed along to my morning playlist before I even pressed play. One afternoon he casually mentioned a funny story I had only ever told my husband, something personal, something I knew for a fact my husband never shared. My breath hitched for just a second, but I forced a laugh. "Did he tell you that?" I asked. His eyes flickered with amusement before he shrugged. "Must have overheard it. But I knew that wasn't possible. When I told my husband, he chuckled. That's just how he is, he pays attention." His words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't. Later, our elderly neighbor waved me over. "Saw your brother-in-law outside last week," she said. I frowned. "He had only moved in 2 days ago." "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Watched him walk past your window. Thought he lived here already." A chill ran down my spine. At first it was easy to ignore. He was friendly, helpful, always ready with a joke. But then I started noticing things. Too many things. He knew how I liked my tea, just a splash of milk, no sugar. He hummed along to my morning playlist before I even pressed play. One afternoon he casually mentioned a funny story I had only ever told my husband, something personal, something I knew for a fact my husband never shared. My breath hitched for just a second, but I forced a laugh. "Did he tell you that?" I asked. His eyes flickered with amusement before he shrugged. "Must have overheard it. But I knew that wasn't possible. When I told my husband, he chuckled. That's just how he is, he pays attention." His words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't. Later, our elderly neighbor waved me over. "Saw your brother-in-law outside last week," she said. I frowned. "He had only moved in 2 days ago." "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Watched him walk past your window. Thought he lived here already." A chill ran down my spine. I felt his eyes on me. Not always, not obviously, but enough to make my skin prickle. When I glanced up, he'd already looked away as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. He was watching. It wasn't just a feeling, it was real. At dinner, I caught him staring across the table, his expression unreadable. "Something on my face?" I joked, forcing a smile. He smirked, shook his head, went back to his plate. But the way he did it, the ease, the confidence, it rattled me. That night, I woke up abruptly, a deep unease settling in my chest. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the hallway. Then I saw it. A silhouette standing in the doorway. My pulse pounded. I couldn't make out a face, but I knew. I knew. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a dream. When I looked again, gone. The next morning over coffee he grinned. "That's a cute set you sleep in," he said. My stomach dropped. I hadn't worn it before last night. I hadn't worn it around him. I needed to clear my head. I needed my husband. The distance between us had grown without either of us noticing, but now I felt it like a weight pressing down on me. "Let's go out tonight," I suggested. He smiled, surprised but eager. We went to our favorite place, the dim lighting and soft music wrapping around us like a cocoon. For the first time in weeks I felt normal, grounded. We laughed, talked, shared a bottle of wine. When he leaned in and kissed me, slow and familiar, a warmth spread through my chest. This was real. This was where I belonged. But the moment shattered as soon as we stepped inside our house. His brother was there, lounging on the couch, feet up, an unreadable smirk on his face. "Good night." "Good night," he asked, voice too casual. My breath hitched. Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Then it hit me, he wasn't supposed to be home. He had told us he had plans. So how did he know exactly when we'd be back? Something about the way my neighbor lingered near her porch that morning made me uneasy. She usually just waved and went back inside, but today she hesitated, eyes flicking toward my house, lips pressed together like she was deciding whether to speak. I forced a smile, but before I could walk past, she called out, "Everything all right over there?" Her voice was casual, but something in her tone wasn't. My stomach tightened. "Yeah, why?" I asked, trying to sound normal. She hesitated again, then sighed. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but I saw someone outside your house last week. Late at night." My fingers curled around the coffee cup in my hands. "Someone?" I echoed. She nodded. "I assumed it was your husband, but I don't know, he just stood there, looking up at your window." My breath caught. I swallowed hard. "What night?" She thought for a moment. "Maybe Tuesday? Around 2 in the morning." A chill ran through me. Tuesday. The same night I had woken up, heart pounding, feeling like someone was watching me from the doorway. Something felt off. I had ignored it for too long, dismissed every unsettling moment, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that my own home was no longer mine. I searched through my things, my hands trembling, pulling open drawers, checking shelves. Then I saw it, or rather I didn't. My hair tie, the one I always kept on my nightstand, was gone. My old bottle of perfume, barely used but still there last week, missing. My compact mirror, the one I hadn't touched in months, gone. My throat went dry. I took a slow breath, grabbed my phone and opened my messages. I needed to tell my husband. But as I went to call him, my stomach lurched. There in my call log was an incoming call from my own number. My hands went cold. I hadn't called myself. My mind scrambled for an explanation when suddenly the door creaked open. I turned sharply, my pulse hammering. He was there, leaning against the frame, watching. A slow, knowing smirk on his face. "Looking for something?" His voice was light, almost amused. My fingers clenched around the phone. I couldn't breathe. She had spent the afternoon buried in storage room chaos, clearing out years of forgotten clutter. His brother had stopped by earlier, asking to borrow tools, but when he saw the mess, he couldn't resist offering a hand. They worked through piles of dust-covered boxes, shifting furniture, sorting through old memories. It was exhausting, lifting, pushing, dragging. Then came the moment neither of them expected. A heavy, overstuffed box refused to budge. He yanked at it hard, and suddenly it gave way, sending both of them crashing backward into a heap of forgotten holiday decorations and blankets. She gasped, then burst out laughing. "My so I couldn't handle that," she blurted, lifting her tiny, horrified Persian cat from the wreckage. The poor thing, having been napping peacefully, now looked utterly betrayed. His brother smirked, eyes flicking to hers with something unreadable. By the evening, the house was still, but the unease hadn't faded. She noticed his door was open, just slightly. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Her breath caught. Photos. Dozens of them. Of her and her husband. But in some, her husband had been deliberately cut out. The realization sent ice through her veins. A shadow moved behind her. She turned sharply. He was there. Too close, watching, his presence pressing into her space. A slow, deliberate step forward. A tilt of his head. A moment that should never have happened. Then the front door opened. Her husband stood in the doorway. He didn't speak. He just stared. He didn't say a word. Not a question, not a demand, not even anger, just silence. He looked at her, at his brother, at the space between them, then turned and walked out. She ran after him, heart pounding, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away without hesitation. Wait, please, it's not what you think. Her voice cracked, but he didn't stop. The front door slammed behind him and then he was gone. Her hands shook as she called him once, twice, 5 times. No answer. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every shadow felt like something. He told herself she was being paranoid. But was she? Days passed. Life moved on, but the feeling remained, a weight pressing against her chest. One afternoon she stopped by the store trying to regain some sense of normalcy. But as she grabbed her keys at checkout, she felt it. That cold, prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Someone was watching. She turned sharply. No one. She exhaled, shaking her head, but as she reached into her coat pocket, her fingers brushed against something that shouldn't be there. A folded piece of paper. Heart pounding, she pulled it out, unfolded it, read the words. You didn't really think it was over, did you? She looked around, pulse hammering. No one.